You were the kid who finished tests first, the one teachers called brilliant, the one everyone expected to change the world. So why does your life feel so empty? The curse of high intelligence is a loneliness that never fully heals. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this over 200 years ago. He was a genius who spent most of his life alone, bitter, and misunderstood. And he discovered something about gifted minds that psychology is only now beginning to confirm. Gifted children become broken adults, not because they failed, but because the very thing that made them special became their prison. Today, we're going to explore why the brightest kids often become the loneliest adults, why that potential everyone saw in you might have actually been a burden, and what Schopenhauer's dark philosophy reveals about the hidden suffering of the intellectually gifted. The isolation begins. It starts so innocently. You're 5 years old, and while other kids are playing tag, you're wondering why the sky is blue. You ask questions that make adults uncomfortable. You notice patterns others miss. And slowly, without anyone meaning to, a wall begins to form. The person who thinks will find his solitude increasing, and the crowd will seem ever more distant. Schopenhauer noticed that intelligence creates a strange paradox. The more you understand, the less you can share. The deeper your thoughts go, the fewer people can follow. Gifted children don't choose isolation. It chooses them. Studies from the National Association for Gifted Children show that highly intelligent kids often report feeling like aliens in their own classrooms. They learn to hide their curiosity because it makes others uncomfortable. They dumb themselves down to fit in. And every time they do, a piece of their authentic self dies. The tragedy is that the adults around them call this adaptation. They call it social skills. But what they are really watching is the slow death of a unique mind. And this is only the beginning of the struggle. The praise trap. Here's where it gets darker. You were told you were special, gifted, exceptional, and those words felt like sunshine at first. But Schopenhauer understood something about praise that most people miss. He wrote that external validation becomes a poison for those capable of internal worth. When you're constantly praised for being smart, something sinister happens in your brain. Your identity becomes fused with achievement. You're not a person who happens to be intelligent. You are your intelligence. Smart equals worthy. And this creates a terrifying vulnerability. Because what happens when you struggle? What happens when something doesn't come easily? Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindset revealed that praised children often develop a paralyzing fear of failure. They avoid challenges because failing would mean they're not special anymore. If this is resonating with you right now, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me, because understanding this pattern is the first step to breaking it. The gifted child learns that love is conditional on performance, and that lesson follows them into adulthood like a shadow they can never escape. But there's another layer to this that makes it even worse. Existential dread. Most children worry about monsters under the bed. Gifted children worry about the meaninglessness of existence. At an age when they should be carefree, they're grappling with questions that adults spend lifetimes avoiding. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence was actually a curse. The more intelligent a person is, the more he suffers. Why? Because awareness brings pain. A dog doesn't contemplate its mortality. A child of average intelligence doesn't lie awake wondering why anything exists at all. But the gifted child does. They see through the comfortable illusions that keep most people happy. They notice the hypocrisy in adults. They question rules that everyone else accepts blindly. This early awakening to life's harsh realities creates what psychologists call existential depression. It's not sadness about something specific. It's a deep, philosophical grief about the nature of existence itself. And here's what makes it truly isolating. Who can a 10-year-old talk to about the meaninglessness of life? Their parents don't understand. Their teachers think they are being dramatic. And their peers are still arguing about video games. The gifted child learns to carry this weight alone. And that loneliness becomes permanent. The perfectionism prison. You know that voice in your head. The one that says nothing you do is ever good enough. That voice was installed during childhood, and Schopenhauer would have recognized it immediately. He wrote about how the pursuit of perfection becomes a form of self-torture for the intelligent mind. When everything comes easily at first, you never learn how to fail. You never develop the resilience that comes from struggling and surviving. So when you finally face something difficult, your brain interprets it as catastrophe. Struggle means failure, failure means worthless. Research shows that gifted children are significantly more likely to develop anxiety disorders and perfectionism that follows them into adulthood. They procrastinate not because they are lazy, but because starting something means risking imperfection. They abandon projects 90% complete because the gap between their vision and reality feels unbearable. Paralysis. This is why so many gifted adults are underachievers, not because they lack ability, but because the terror of not meeting their own impossible standards keeps them frozen. Schopenhauer himself struggled with this. Despite his brilliance, he spent decades in obscurity, too proud to compromise, too afraid to fully commit. And this brings us to the most painful part of the gifted experience. Relationships fail. Intimacy requires vulnerability. Connection requires being understood. And for the gifted adult, both feel nearly impossible. Schopenhauer was famously difficult in relationships. He pushed people away before they could reject him. He found most human interaction tedious and superficial. And while we might judge him harshly, he was articulating something that many gifted people feel but cannot express. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. When your mind works differently than 98% of the population, finding genuine connection becomes statistically improbable. You learn to wear masks. You learn to nod along to conversations that bore you. You learn to never fully show yourself because the last time you did, you were met with blank stares or worse, mockery. And so you retreat further into yourself. Studies on adult giftedness reveal consistently higher rates of relationship dissatisfaction. Gifted individuals often report feeling like they are performing in relationships rather than authentically connecting. They attract partners who are drawn to their intelligence but who cannot meet them at their depth. The loneliness of the gifted child becomes the isolation of the gifted adult. Different circumstances, same fundamental wound. But what if there's a way out of this prison? The imposter within. Here's the cruelest irony of all. Despite all that praise, despite being told you're gifted your entire life, you probably don't believe it. Welcome to imposter syndrome, and gifted individuals experience it at epidemic levels. Schopenhauer would have understood this perfectly. He wrote about how the truly intelligent person is always aware of how much they don't know. While mediocre minds are confident in their ignorance, brilliant minds are paralyzed by their awareness of infinite complexity. You feel like a fraud. Every success feels like luck. Every compliment feels like deception. You're waiting for the world to discover that you're not actually special, that everyone was wrong about you all along. The brilliant child grows up waiting to be exposed as ordinary. This creates a devastating cycle. You achieve something remarkable, but instead of feeling proud, you feel anxious. You immediately start worrying about maintaining the illusion. Every new challenge is another opportunity to be unmasked. And so success brings no joy, only the temporary relief of not being discovered. Yet, Schopenhauer spent his life feeling underappreciated despite his genius. He died before the world recognized his importance. The imposter within never lets us enjoy our accomplishments. Anger and resentment. Let's talk about the emotion that gifted adults rarely admit to feeling. Anger, resentment, bitterness. Schopenhauer was notorious for his pessimism, his contempt for humanity, his bitter criticisms of nearly everyone. But was he simply born cynical, or was his darkness forged in the fire of unmet expectations? Promise, disappointment, rage. When you're told your whole life that you're destined for greatness, and then life delivers ordinary struggles and ordinary failures and ordinary relationships, something breaks inside you. You feel cheated, betrayed, not by any specific person but by existence itself. Life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. This resentment often gets misdirected. Gifted adults may become arrogant, looking down on others to protect their wounded ego. They may become passive-aggressive, sabotaging themselves to prove the world wrong, or they may turn the anger inward, falling into depression and self-destruction. The world promised them something special and delivered something ordinary. And that gap between expectation and reality creates a wound that festers for decades. But here's what Schopenhauer eventually discovered: the meaning crisis. Average minds find meaning easily. A good job, a happy family, simple pleasures and comfortable routines. But the gifted mind cannot rest in these easy answers. It questions everything. And in that questioning, meaning dissolves. Schopenhauer believed that human life was fundamentally meaningless, a brief spark of consciousness in an indifferent universe. Harsh, yes. But what if he was simply seeing clearly what others refuse to see? The gifted adult often experiences what researchers call the meaning crisis more acutely than others. They've analyzed every philosophy, questioned every religion, deconstructed every belief system, and they are left with rubble. Nothing. This is why gifted individuals have higher rates of existential depression, and why they often turn to substances or distractions to numb the void. They're not weaker than others. They're simply more aware. And awareness without wisdom is torture. The curse of seeing is knowing that most people prefer blindness. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, argued that humans can endure anyhow if they have a why. But what happens when your intelligence keeps destroying every why you construct? This brings us to the question Schopenhauer spent his life trying to answer: Schopenhauer's escape. Despite his pessimism, Schopenhauer didn't advocate for despair. He found escape routes, and understanding them might save your life. First, he discovered aesthetic experience. Art, music, literature, the momentary transcendence when you lose yourself in beauty. For Schopenhauer, this was the closest humans could come to peace. The endless wanting temporarily stops. The effect of music is so very much more powerful than that of the other arts, for they speak only of shadows, but music speaks of the thing itself. Second, he found solace in compassion. Paradoxically, this bitter misanthrope believed that recognizing suffering in others could dissolve the prison of isolation. Your pain, my pain, our pain. When you truly see that everyone is struggling, even the people who seem happy, a strange connection emerges. You're not alone in your suffering. Suffering is the universal condition. Third, and most importantly, he advocated for the denial of the will to live. Not suicide, but the transcendence of ego, desire, and ambition. The acceptance that life will never satisfy you and finding peace in that acceptance. Liberation comes not from getting what you want, but from wanting differently. These weren't complete solutions. Schopenhauer himself remained difficult and isolated until his death, but they point toward something crucial: becoming whole. So where does this leave you? The gifted child who became a struggling adult, the brilliant mind trapped in loneliness, the person who was supposed to change the world but can barely get through the day. Here's what Schopenhauer never quite understood, but what modern psychology has discovered. Your intelligence is not your identity. It's one part of a complex whole, and the healing begins when you stop trying to live up to the potential everyone saw in you and start learning to simply be. The gifted child never learned how to fail, how to struggle, how to be ordinary. Those lessons can be learned now. Fail, struggle, grow. Finding your tribe matters. There are others like you, other minds that question everything, that see too deeply, that carry the weight of awareness. Connection is possible, even if it's rare. No one can escape from themselves, but you can stop fighting yourself. You can accept that your mind works differently and build a life that honors that difference rather than trying to conform to expectations that were never meant for you. The loneliness of the gifted child doesn't have to define the gifted adult. Schopenhauer found moments of peace. You can find more than moments. Schopenhauer died alone. But in his final years, the world finally started to recognize his genius. He found students, readers, people who understood. The isolation wasn't permanent. It just felt that way for a very long time. If you were a gifted child who became a struggling adult, understand this. Your suffering was not a failure, but an awakening that came too early. You saw truths before you had the tools to handle them. You felt depths before you could swim, and you carried weights that no child should bear. Awareness plus compassion equals wisdom. The intelligence that isolated you can also connect you to the deepest truths of existence. The sensitivity that wounded you can also open you to beauty that others miss entirely. The curse can become a gift if you learn to wield it differently. If you made it this far, comment "Gifted Awakened" if you finally feel understood. Compassion is the basis of morality. Include yourself in that compassion. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe for more. Understanding yourself is the work of a lifetime.